Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us tonight. My name is Steve Jamroz, and I'm the Director of Marketing here at Dan. Tonight I'm here with my colleague, Dr. Frauke Tillmans, and we're here to welcome you to a special webinar presentation with our friends over at scuba.com that will explain how you can return to diving safely. If you're watching one of our webinars tonight for the first time, tonight's presentation will last approximately 30 to 45 minutes, and we'll follow it up with a question and answer session at the end. We were able to get some questions in through the scuba.com folks through the registration, and we're going to address those periodically throughout the presentation tonight as we go. So you may see your name and question up there. Also, this webinar will be recorded, so if you're either coming in late tonight or you need to leave early, you'll be able to watch this in its entirety over on Dan's YouTube page on your own schedule. And if you're viewing this presentation on the event page at scuba.com, keep in mind that you won't be able to ask questions there. You'll have to click the YouTube button on the lower left, jump on over to YouTube, ask your question in the chat there, and we'll address those later at the end. Our presenter this evening is my colleague, Dr. Frauke Tillmans. Dr. Tillmans is the research director here at Dan. She has a degree in human biology and a PhD in oxidative stress. Dr. Tillmans is an experienced public safety diver, scientific diver, and dive safety officer. So she's very accomplished and she's got a lot of experience in dive safety and she knows what she's talking about. So good to have you here tonight, Dr. Tillmans.
Thank you.
So if you have questions, again, at the end, please put those in the chat box. We'll address those or as much as we can. We'll also be sharing some information tonight. If you have questions after this webinar concludes, you'll be able to contact both us and scuba.com if you have questions about equipment or anything like that. They're the experts in that area. But before we begin the presentation tonight, I'd just like to provide a brief overview of DAN, or Divers Alert Network. We may have some new divers tonight with us, or maybe people who've been diving for quite a while that are not familiar with Divers Alert Network. But we're a nonprofit, member-based organization. We've been dedicated to the health and safety of divers since 1980. Last year we celebrated our 40th anniversary. We like to refer to ourselves as a dive safety association, and we specialize in dive safety research, training, and education. And Dan's a little bit different when we talk about we're a scuba diving company. We're not a traditional company in the sense where we don't sell fins and regulators and equipment like that. Our specialty is in-house doctors, medics, travel experts that can help you and assist you in the event you have a dive or travel emergency while you're on a trip. Over the last 40 years, we've reinvested over $100 million in dive safety initiatives for the benefit of divers worldwide. And we're really here and all about helping all divers. Our products include membership, dive accident insurance, and travel insurance. We're going to cover those at the end of the presentation because those are all very important things to have with you before you embark on your next dive travel trip. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Tillmans. She's going to go through our presentation tonight. It's entitled Return to Diving Safely. It's 6 steps for a safe return. And we're going to go through this information. There's a lot of information to be covered tonight. We're only scratching the surface on a lot of it, really. We're a wealth of resources. You'll see some QR codes as we go through the event tonight. The one on your screen to the right, if you scan that with your phone, that will take you right to the Return to Diving Safely page over on dan.org. And there's tons of information that you can get there if you have unanswered questions tonight. So with that lead-in, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Tillmans. Dr. Tillmans, take it away for us.
Thank you, Steve, for that awesome introduction. So as Steve iterated before, we have all this information I'm going to talk about on the website. So if you go to dan.org/return, or you just follow this QR code right here on the right, this will get you through these 6 steps that I'm going to talk about in more detail. And what are these steps? So we are talking about inactivity and how different reasons for your inactivity might influence how you need to take these other 5 steps. Health status is going to be one, fitness level is going to be one step, equipment is going to be one, and diving skills, one of the most important. And then we are going to talk about what you might want to think about if you have travel plans and are going to go into exotic locations post-pandemic or still in the pandemic. So inactivity, what does this mean? So there's different reasons for everyone, for every diver, why you might not have been in the water for a while. And the important thing is that you need to address whatever that reason was, whether it was medical or really just the quarantine requirements. All that is important for you because that will determine how you need to address potential issues. So whether that was personal obligations or commitments, whether you were ill, whether it was the pandemic, doesn't make a big difference because if you don't use it, you lose it. That goes for everything in diving, and that means you want to brush up on a lot of things depending on what it was that kept you out of the water. And we have put together this as a overview, which you can also find on the website. And bear with me while I'm walking you through this, and a lot of these things are going to show up again in the presentation. So if it has been a period, so this here in the front is the interval you haven't been in the water. So if it has been up to 12 months, we recommend that you fill out a medical form that I'm going to talk about in more detail in a bit, basically as a guide, as a self-assessment. Same goes for fitness. If you feel fit enough, if your personal activity level hasn't dropped a lot during that time, then so you yourself make the call. We do want you to do a refresher dive or a check dive before you go on to explore bigger things. And your equipment might just need a regular maintenance or really just a visual check, depending on what type of gear you have. And then if it has been 1 to 3 or 3 to 10 years, that very much depends on why that happened. We would encourage you to have an annual medical exam. So go to an actual physician who is qualified in diving and or hyperbaric medicine, who can evaluate whether you are fit to dive. Fitness, it does make sense to have to do a swim test just to see how well you're still doing. If you never were a strong swimmer, even more important to brush up on those skills. Or a supervised fitness test if it has been a long time, just to get a feeling for where you are, or an official assessment on where you are on the fitness scale. And then there is, for the skill levels, do a pool refresher or a skills update. Most agencies offer that in one or another capacity. And or if it has been a while, a comprehensive refresher course, including at least the skill portion, if not also the classroom portion of the dive course. And your equipment definitely wants to go into professional service. And again, we're covering all of those again when we go through the different steps. And then if it has been 10 years or more, you might have raised a family, or your business took off and you just really had the time, didn't have the time to go diving. You want to do an entry-level fitness to dive evaluation again, and you might want to take a full open water course again. For equipment, the older it is, the more could potentially be wrong with it, and all that is life safety support. So you want maybe consider getting rid of old things and invest in new things. And again, this is something we're going to cover in more detail. But this is, if you won't take anything else away from this webinar, this is basically where you find the information, and all that is going to is available for you at dan.org/return. So what about that health status? I've talked about the diver medical participation questionnaire, and we made it easy for you to find it. Again, we have this beautiful QR code here that you can scan that takes you right to it. It's a PDF that you can print out. Some agencies and some instructors will give you that or give you a link to that anyway and require that you fill that out. So this is either for your self-assessment or to go through with your physician to see where you stand on the fitness. Then here is the overview, again, to be found on the website. I won't walk you through this graph as it is. I'm going to refer to our guidelines for lifelong medical fitness to dive again. So again, I'm going to walk you through this in not every step, but the most important ones. If you're a candidate, you've never been in the water before, you're taking an entry-level course, or you have been out of the water for extensive amount of times, and basically are starting to dive again from scratch, then you want before you take the course, you want to fill out that diver medical participant questionnaire that I just pointed to. If you are healthy, whatever that means for you, but if you don't have any acute illnesses, no risk factors and so on, you want to do a medical evaluation or fill out this form once a year. And now, some of you will hate me, but by the time you turn 45, you might want to consider doing an actual medical evaluation with a diving physician, which means there's a diver medical physical evaluation form, which we're happy to point you to, which is also to be found on our website and on the website of the Underwater Hyperbaric Medical Society, or UHMS. Again, we're happy to provide that link for you. This goes if you're over 45, but it also goes if you are asymptomatic but have 2 or more of the following risk factors. So if you're a smoker, if you have high blood pressure, whether you take medication for it and have it under control or not, high cholesterol, obesity, a family history of heart disease, or if you just refuse to exercise. All those are risk factors that we would like you to acknowledge, and that for us are a sign that you should seek a medical evaluation with a professional. And then healthy divers over 65 years old, again, if you have pre-existing diseases, this medical evaluation turns from every 5 years to every year. And this is to protect you, to keep you safe. This is not something that the healthcare industry has come up with to make money. This is for you to make sure that you surface safely after your dive. And then if you had an acute illness, or you have it now, that is a no-brainer that you do not dive at that point, but you do want to take another diver medical participant questionnaire just to see if you are back to the status where you were before.
So I have a question, Dr.
Right.
Tillman. So you just mentioned acute illness. So what about a diver who's had COVID? You know, COVID's been such a big thing over the last year and a half, and all the infections and high infection rates. Does someone who's had COVID fall into that acute illness box, or is that a different set of considerations they need to take into account?
So there's currently a lot of debate and a lot of new information coming in about divers who had COVID, and if divers should just go diving again without any follow-up, or it very much depends on the severity of your illness. So if you had a severe illness, you were hospitalized, or you had symptoms for 4 weeks or 6 weeks, and it took you a long time to get back to your personal fitness level, then that is definitely a point where we would want you to seek a medical evaluation, so a fit to dive exam. If you remained asymptomatic and your everything that turned up in your medical history is a positive antibody test, that you basically that you had to take, but you never experienced any symptoms, that is a different pair of shoes. So again, if you know you had COVID, and we do know COVID is messing with lungs and hearts and brains, we're going to have a special webinar on that tomorrow, where our doctors, Dr. Noceto, Saraiva, and Chimiak are going to talk about this in more detail, because there has been a conference very recently where we discussed a lot of this. But long story short, we always like people to take a Fit to Dive exam, to have the certainty that nothing is wrong with you, especially a pulmonary function test. If you were absolutely asymptomatic, that might not be necessary, but keep in mind, if something is off or something is strange during the first dive, that is the time to call us and or your diving physician.
I think that's good advice. Be rather safe than sorry if you're for sure.
Absolutely. And then, as we said, there are a few questions that came in. So pertaining to health, what are the best protective measures divers can take as we move back into diving and international travel? So most of it, or on the health perspective or health level, the best protective measure for you is see a physician, and that physician will examine you and tell you whether you are fit to dive. That is the main takeaway for this one. Then there's obviously more protective measures that you can take, and we're going to talk about those in moving forward in the next few sections. Then Teresa and Brian and Suzanne basically all pointed into the same direction. So what about cardiac health and safe diving over 50, and fitness recommendations for the aging diver? This is a huge issue and a big part of Dan's work in research and medicine, that we are focusing on an aging diver population. Obviously, we cannot turn back the clock, we cannot reverse time. So with aging, there come comorbidities, which we call illnesses that are more likely to have at a certain age. So what we recommend is obviously trying to stay fit and to stay healthy. And that is basically the intro to the next section that we're going to talk about, which is fitness to dive. So in fitness to dive, I personally had that issue for a long time, or sometimes still have it. I don't know what is fit. When am I fit? When is it enough? When am I doing enough to keep healthy and to keep fit? So you have different options to determine your aerobic exercise capacity, so your fitness level. And one of them is go into a laboratory with a physician who can measure your VO2 max under strenuous exercise. So you would get on a treadmill or a bike, and they will measure exhale and exhale, and so this maximum oxygen uptake is a perfect measure for aerobic exercise capacity, but very unfunctional for someone who just wants to know, am I fit enough for what I'm trying to do? So a second way that is often recommended and has been recommended for decades now is to measure METs, or metabolic equivalents. And this can become complicated. It wasn't meant to be. So METs are basically, one MET is sitting on the couch and watching Netflix, while 6 METs is a walk in the park. And then 12 METs might be something like swimming at a not leisure, at an actual pace, with getting the breathing and the heart rate up. So while this is, again, very individual, that is a measure that you can do or that you can take, but there is an easier way to do it. And the easiest way is to think about your sub-maximal exercise test, which is 85% of your maximum heart rate. So how do you calculate your maximum heart rate? You want to take 220 and then you want to subtract your age. You can all do that real quick while I'm waiting here. Once you have that number, you want to calculate 85% of that. And I'm not going to do it, I'm not good at math, but Steve can do it at the same time, and I'm going to ask you questions about this in a minute. So your sub-maximal exercise test heart rate is 85% of the 220 minus your age. And where does that get us? That gets us to several physical activity classifications, of which the first one would be sedentary. Again, one mat, sitting on the couch, watching, streaming something. Then there is light exercise, which is under 50% of your maximum heart rate. Again, you would be walking just a stroll, or swimming at a leisure pace. Then there's moderate exercise, which is 50 to 70% of your maximum heart rate. And then there's vigorous exercise between 70 and 85% of your maximum heart rate. If you have calculated that, that is your individual value. So you can calculate that for you, and then obviously you can also calculate that for your spouse. But this is not going to be the same for everyone. Plus, if you've never been exercising before, you might want to make some light adjustments to this anyway. What we would want you to do, so action items for you, is 2.5 hours of moderate intensity aerobic exercise. Running, walking, cycling, swimming, any of those. The more the better. So I say 2.5 hours, that is half an hour on 5 days a week. That might be the walk and the lunch break, but more is better. 5 hours is obviously better than that. There is a limit to that. You don't want to to overdo it, but yeah, that is a good measure. And then if you can, sprinkle in 2 days of muscle strength exercise. And for that, there's a ton of things that have been done during the pandemic for you that where you use equipment that you have at home, or you might have ordered weights on Amazon for these type of. So just try to do 2 days a week of muscle strength exercise.
So Dr. Tillmans, before you go on here, when you started talking about this slide, you mentioned a number of different exercises, whether it was running, swimming, a number of things. Is there any one exercise that's more effective for divers, or let's say someone only has a little bit of time, and would you recommend one exercise over another for them?
Well, for little time, the one I'm going to recommend is not going to be the best. Obviously, a big fan of swimming. Why wouldn't I be swimming? Because I need to be in the water. I need to be able to float for a long time. So being comfortable in the water and swimming is obviously a good way to do this. But anything that will get your heart rate up is good. So anything that will help you get better, get your heart rate variability up, is definitely good.
Okay.
The weight or the muscle strength exercises will help with heavy gear. We all know that dive gear becomes much heavier once we get out of the water, so that is something to consider as well. At least it feels like that to me. And then just a warning for everyone who has never been fit, never wanted to be fit, but still wants to be diving. If you start your exercise journey now, you want to start slow. There is absolutely no use in overdoing it the first day and then deciding my muscles don't allow for any more exercise for the next week. So just start slow, increase intensity very gradually. And if you have anything that bothers you, a bad knee, a bad hip, your back is always aching, there is people that have studied this for decades. So You can consult a physician, you can consult a fitness coach, you could consult a nutritionist, all that, those are options, and you have just spent thousands of dollars in expensive dive gear. You might as well spend some money on your personal fitness and your health. Which brings us to equipment. And equipment, this is where I'm going to jump over to Steve for our disclaimer.
Yeah, thank you, Frauke. And before we get started in the equipment section here, I think it's important to just touch on this, especially for the new people who may be joining us this evening for the first time and are not really sure what Dan does. They maybe heard of Dan, but they're not really certain. So, you know, we're a scuba diving company, but not in the traditional sense of a lot of people maybe think. You know, we're not in the equipment business. We don't sell, we don't service equipment. You know, we're in the safety business. That's really our core interest, and we're brand neutral. And when it comes to equipment, it doesn't really matter to us what brand of equipment a diver may have or may not have. The most important things are that the equipment's in good working order. It fits the diver. You know, it makes no difference if you've got the latest and greatest BC. If it's too loose and you're slipping out of it, it's a buoyancy and safety problem. It meets your type of diving that you're trying to do, and that you get it serviced at the recommended manufacturer interval. So that's really where we're coming from tonight when she goes through these slides here. Keep that in mind. The folks over at scuba.com, that's their area of expertise, so make sure to check out their website. They can definitely help you in that area.
Thanks, I'm glad we got that one out of the way. So what do we want you to do with your gear? We want you to make sure that it is clean. And we hope that you have taken care of that way before taking it out of the closet, ideally when putting it into the closet, that you've stored it away clean and disinfected, and that it did not tear on the way, or that it didn't dry rot away. And then you want to learn all the signs for wear and tear of your gear. So this is something that you can actually YouTube and Google. What do I need to think about, or what do I want to look at? So obviously, if you have color discoloration, was that because it was lying in the sun too much, or is there actually is there going to be a hole in the near future? Things like that. And then obviously, if there's holes in the equipment, those are signs of wear and tear that you can look at. Other thing, are the hoses still okay? Are the hoses breaking? Is there anything that looks like it might give in shortly? So that is something you can do. And then what you also want to look at is it functioning? And by functioning, we mean, do all the buttons work? Do all the releases work? Do all the clips still work? Is anything so porous or so bad that it might be breaking, or that it is almost broken already? And then you want to pressurize the whole system too. So just being able to push the purge button on your regulator when it is sitting there is one thing, but being able to push it and it being really functional when it is connected to a tank is what you're really interested in. And then you want to look at your electronics, lights, computers. Are the batteries charged? Are the batteries replaced? Do they need replacement? Does the equipment needs reservicing, or is it good to go? And then the most important part, and I cannot stress this enough, is, are you familiar with your own gear? And that is with every piece of your equipment. So you've just bought a new BC, or someone talked you into buying this new dive computer, and you've just taken it out of the box and now you jump in. That is not best practice. What you want to do is really familiarize yourself with it, read the manual. I know that's a bit of a stretch, most people don't, but please do. Look at all the functions it has, go through all the menus. Make sure you know what the computer cannot do. Make sure you know where the buttons and releases on your new piece of gear are. Make sure you feel comfortable enough breathing from your new regulator. Or if something feels off, or all of a sudden there's a higher breathing resistance than you had in your last one. Those are things you want to figure out before you go diving and not when you jump in.
I think that's a great piece of advice, Dr. Tillmans. And just kind of one follow-up question, and I find it interesting. You know, we live in a technology generation, and nowadays with YouTube, I mean, you can learn how to fix anything on YouTube. Can you give the audience watching tonight any general rule of thumb guidelines, like what's something you may be able to fix on your own, where another item you may want to take it to a professional, to have someone with some knowledge and experience to take a look at it?
So, great question. We do live in that YouTube era, and everyone is an expert and everyone is a technician all of a sudden because they watched a YouTube video. So the short answer is follow your manufacturer instructions, which means if the gear hasn't been serviced in a long time, take it for service. Don't start taking things apart. There's people that are trained for that. YouTube doesn't make you a technician for any manufacturer. Also, make sure that the dive shop you're taking it to is actually licensed, or actually has technicians that have gone through the regulator repair or the rec clinic for that particular manufacturer. There are certainly things that you can try to fix yourself. That is as much as put another fin strap on or replace a mask strap. But as soon as it comes to life support equipment, that is a no-go. You do not want to mess with that.
I think that's good advice, sure.
So what type of equipment are we looking at? Obviously, your thermal protection will suffer over time. Boots, hoods, gloves are not getting better. They're usually getting stiff when they sit around for too long. They might also shrink over the pandemic. That probably happened to most of us. So make sure that it still fits and that it doesn't have any holes, or that all the threads are still working or still intact. And then for everything that's life support, which means your regulator, your buoyancy compensator that will get you to the surface, all of those need regular maintenance and they need regular servicing. And that is something you cannot ignore. You don't want to ignore that. Obviously, you are in charge of cleaning and disinfecting your gear, which we have talked a lot about in previous webinars, and those are all still available on our website. And then your manufacturer will recommend certain maintenance. So, do I store the dry suit with the zipper open or closed? That is a big, almost religious discussion, but your manufacturer will tell you what they think you should be doing. And then service. For regulators, this is often 1 year to 2 years, depending, or 100 dives or something around that area. And after that, you do want to take that piece of equipment, your life support, your life insurance, back into the shop. And they take it apart, they clean it, they put new parts in, the parts that usually have more wear and tear, or are that will break eventually, and then you get it back and you basically have a new regulator. That is what you want to do.
Yeah, that's great advice. I think that's a really key takeaway from this evening,
Right.
is not only get the proper gear, but to get it serviced at routine, regular intervals based upon the manufacturer's requirements, and to take it to somebody who knows what they're doing, who's got some experience in this area. The folks at scuba.com, they're definitely experts in this area. They've got technicians that know all the gear, all the different brands. They can definitely help you. Again, that's not really what Dan does. We're more of a safety company, safety focused. The QR code that you see on the screen here, you can scan that with your phone. That'll take you over to the folks at scuba.com, and you can get more information about any service that you need to have done before your next dive trip. So make sure you get that taken care of.
Right. And then we also got some questions about equipment, so thank you for sending those in. Daniel wants to know, I haven't been diving in 2 years and my regulator was last serviced shortly before my last dive trip, during which I dove 21 times. Do I need to service it again before my next trip? Should I soak it in water to re-lubricate the parts? So again, very simple answer, follow your manufacturer's recommendations. I know it is tempting to just say, I've been diving it for a week or so. I've put it in the closet, nothing happened to it, but parts do dry rot. O-rings might give in after some time just sitting, not even being underwater. So we recommend, yes, take it for servicing. And then, what is the lifespan of equipment, of dive equipment? How do I get parts for gear from companies that are no longer in business? And for both of those questions, the apparent answer is there's no one size fits all. So what is the lifespan for dive equipment? It depends. I know people that have had a mask for 30 years and still swear it's in good shape. And I know people that exchange their fins every 2 years. Whether that is because a new color comes out or if they're actually broken. So there is no general recommendation. I would say that equipment that has lasted you a decade is definitely in for replacement. But that is just me, and I do see that not everyone has a pot of gold, neither do I. But it is something to consider. What you want to consider then as well is if your equipment is 10, 15, 20 years old, things have changed in between. That means the industry has put a lot of research and development into new equipment that is actually better, more comfortable to wear, lighter for travel, and so on. There's a lot of pros or good reasons to get new gear. I'm not selling gear, so I'll leave this to our friends here at scuba.com to walk you through all the pros of getting new equipment. The second part of the question is sad. If the company is no longer in business, then the only thing you can really do is try to find a dealer that might still have the parts that you were looking for. And if you cannot find that, the only real recommendation we can give is you will have to replace it. That is unfortunate, but nothing we can do about that. And then my personal favorite is coming now, and that is diving skills. So what do you want to do to make sure your diving skills are still up to speed? And all training agencies offer refresher courses, which are an excellent opportunity to just brush up on skills, knowledge, and actual in-water skills. But there's different levels of what you can do. So if it hasn't been too long, just go for a check dive with your friend, your dive partner, your buddy, your dive shop, whoever wants to take you. Don't go alone. I'm coming to that in a second, why I think that would be a bad idea. You can think about a refresher training. So again, there's a lot of educational material out there and a lot of continuing education or refresher courses, just a skill refresher from your agency. So that is something you can take. Or consider it has been so long that you've forgotten everything and you're putting the regulator on the wrong way, then it might be time for retaking that entry-level course. So just take that open water course again. And you will not only benefit from the in-water part, which will probably come back to you sooner or later, but the classroom portion is important as well. There are some best practices and fundamental skills that we would like you to look at, and this is by no means a complete list, but those are, I think we covered the most important ones. So do not underestimate pre-dive checks. You do want to do pre-dive checks. You want to know where is everything on your gear, is everything secure, where are the releases, where is the inflator and the dump valve on your buddy's gear. All of that is important information that might rescue you or your buddy in case of emergency. You want to do a buoyancy check. You might have gained a few pounds or lost a few pounds over the pandemic. You might want to check if the weights you used before are still okay. You might have bought a new BC or a new wetsuit because the last one has become a bit tight over the pandemic. Again, all this will mess with your buoyancy. You want to practice mask clearing, and especially if you haven't been in the water for a long time and you had issues with mask clearing before, it is important that you train that, even if it's just at the surface, just to see that you don't have an issue. If someone kicks off the mask at 90 feet, that is not the right spot to train mask clearing. With that goes mask removal and replacement, recovering and clearing your regulator, and a very important skill, know where your alternate regulator, your second air source is, and know where the spare air source of your dive partner is. Because if you are suffering a catastrophic air loss, that is the only thing that will get you to the surface safe without a complete panic. What is important to stress here, most agencies have gone towards not really practicing the shared air drills, and that is understandable under the pandemic and the current global health situation. So yes, while training, you do not need to breathe from your buddy's regulator. This also, unfortunately, will give you a false, it's just a false muscle memory, so you will take the regulator, but you won't really breathe it. So make sure that you understand all this training, all this repetition is to get you a regulator into your mouth that you can breathe in the case of emergency. This is something that all training agencies have addressed very early in the pandemic, and we're very grateful that that went this way. But keep in mind, this is a kind of artificial training scenario. And then you want to at least once try that controlled emergency swimming ascent or the emergency swimming ascent, depending on your agency. That might be called this way or another.
So then I think those are all really great things, and just kind of thinking about the audience tonight, we've got people from West Coast, we've got people in New York, and everywhere in between, and some of those locations are closer to water than others. It's just easier to get to. What advice would you give to somebody who's only got access to either a pool, their local dive center, or maybe it's a quarry? Like, are these skills that they're practicing, are they still valuable if it's only in a pool? I mean, do people thinking, they have to get to open water?
Fantastic question. Let's go through the slide once more and see which of the skills we can actually do in the pool. So pre-dive checks, definitely. Buoyancy check, definitely. Mask clearing, mask removal, recovery, clearing of your regulator. Those are all skills that you have learned in the pool, ideally, anyway. So good way to refresh those. Switching to an alternate regulator, sharing air. The only thing that might be challenging would be an emergency swimming ascent from 5 feet. But everything else is probably even more valuable done in confined water than it is going out to the quarry or in somewhere with low visibility.
Absolutely. So it's still valuable. Get started slow, and that may be even more valuable to that person who's been out of the water for a while.
Absolutely.
They shouldn't be intimidated by the fact they can't get to that open water.
Right.
Yeah.
And then this is basically what I talked about in the fitness as well. If it has been a long time, you need to take it easy. We are always happy to talk to you on the phone, but we don't want you as the injured diver. We want to give you advice, but we don't want you to call in because you had a medical emergency. So Please always dive with a dive partner, especially beginning first dive after longer inactivity. It doesn't matter if you are self-reliant or solo certified. It really doesn't. What your dive partner will provide for you is life insurance in case something goes wrong, because it has been so long and you might not remember everything that you went through before. So always don't dive solo. Emphasize the pre-dive safety checks. We've talked about that. You want to know everything about your and your partner's gear, and you want your partner to know everything about your gear to be able to bring you to the surface. And that is especially if you dive different configurations. So one person in side mount and one person in back mount, or someone with a single tank versus someone with double tanks. There's a lot of things that are, especially in a rescue situation, would be different between the two. You want to stay shallow for the first dive, so the way to the surface is not that far if something goes wrong and you need to fix things. Avoid unknown and remote dive sites. And this is important because if you have forgotten your weights, or if your fin strap breaks, or if your tank ran empty because the burst disc broke and you didn't know about it because you weren't in the car when it happened, nothing is more frustrating than not being able to dive, but having driven 2 hours to that remote location where you've never been before. And avoid currents and other hazards. And that is important because you don't want to wear yourself out. If there is complicated entry or exit points, if you've never been there before and you don't really know much about the currents, that is not the place to start. That is certainly a place to go later, but it's not the place where you want to do your first dive after not having been for months or years. And then what you can also do is take courses at home. One of them is the Prepared Diver course that I highly recommend, going through all the basics once again. This can be found at dan.diverelearning.com. You can log in or you create an account and you log in, and you can go through the Prepared Diver course. We have special only e-learning courses for contaminated gas and gas analysis. So there's a lot of useful information in that, and it doesn't hurt to have it, and it's completely free. So coming back to the first slide, I think, or to one of the earlier slides, this is what you really want to keep in mind. When do I have to do what? So it is, a lot of it depends on the period, how long you've been out of the water. And I hope that that came across. And then there is a last part that we're going to talk about now, and that is your travel plans. So as restrictions lighten up, and at least we can leave the country again. Not all countries have that luxury at this point, but you want to know something about the location where you're going to, which means you want to Google and look into all resources you can possibly get, tourism information, government information, and so on entry requirements. So what do I need to actually enter the country? Are there any travel restrictions that their or our government has put out on that location? Do I have to quarantine? What is the infection status in that area? An issue with that is, one thing that comes to mind, if you have 2 weeks of vacation, but you get there and you need to quarantine for 6 days, how much of vacation do you actually have? So maybe it is better not to go there right now and choose another destination instead. And then recommended vaccinations and tests, that is important. Some countries will not let you enter without a COVID test at the moment, for example, or repeated COVID tests, or they will have you quarantine and you will have to take the test there repeatedly. That is something you want to know before, so you're not disappointed when you get there and can't go anywhere. And then another very, very important part is emergency medical care in hospitals. So wherever you go, try to find who is either in your network or outside your network, but where is the next emergency medical care facility? Where's the next hospital? Who can take care of you when you are, when you have an ear infection? Who can take care of you if you break a leg on during the dive or not? So this is important information that you will regret if you don't have it once it happens. And another part we want to talk about is check with the dive operator you want to work with on the medical requirements. So that operator might want a medical statement for you, and they can demand that. It is nothing that you can fight. It's their choice if they take you diving or not when you cannot present this. What safety protocols do they have in place? Do they have an emergency action plan? If they have an emergency action plan, do their staff know what that is and how it works and what they need to do? Do they have emergency training? Do they have equipment? Don't be afraid to ask for or let them show you their oxygen kit that they use. What type of diving and fitness is required? And this is very important because some people highly underestimate. They just see the pretty pictures of manta rays and hundreds and hundreds of fish, but they do not realize that the type of diving might be very challenging because you are in strong currents and you need to know how to shoot a lift bag, or you need to know, you need to be able to do a negative entry. So drop to the bottom really quick, otherwise you miss the wreck, or. So all of that, entry and exit requirements. So how easy is it to get into the water and out of the water? All those are things that you want to ask the dive operator before, again, to avoid bad surprises. What certification is required that goes into the same line? And then do they offer refresher courses or check dives? And for me, a good dive operator is one that will ask you for, even if it's just in the pool, a check dive, no matter what certification you show up with, because certifications can be years and years old. And yeah, that is definitely something that I would take into consideration. And then we do have a few questions on travel. Glenn and Calvin, thank you for sending this in. How safe is it to travel to Caribbean locations for diving this upcoming summer? And it comes down to your personal risk-taking willingness, I guess. And it also comes down to doing your homework. You need to see what the infection status is. You need to know what requirements they have for you to travel in the country. And we know they have opened up, but is it safe? We cannot say. So there's again one of those no size fits all answers, I guess. And then Faye has had sent us the question: how safe are dives on cruise ship excursions? Is there any rating? I dove single on an excursion in Cozumel with a cruise boat in 2015. It was very nice. It was a very nice experience. We're happy to hear that. I did not have a dive buddy though. So 2 things to say here. No, there is no rating, but cruise ships in general, and I'm speaking from the biologist in myself now, cruise ships are floating petri dishes, which in a pandemic is certainly not the best place to be. Now, all operators or all charter and cruise ship operators that we know have certainly taken all measurements they possibly could to keep their people safe and to implement tests before boarding and keep everything hyper clean. But is it safe? We cannot say. that is just, yeah, again, comes down to what risk are you willing to take. And then I did not dive with a buddy. I did not have a buddy. I hope that doesn't mean you did dive alone. If you did, don't do it again. If you didn't, your dive operator or the dive operator on that vessel hopefully had a plan in place and let you dive with either another customer or ideally with a dive guide or your or an instructor, someone who I personally like that. I do like following a guide because they usually know where all the nice, pretty things to look at are. So there's nothing wrong with that. And with that, we have one more thing to cover, and that is also pertaining travel. And I'm going to kick over to Steve for that. So
thank you, Dr. Tillmans. And yeah, this is the last chapter of the presentation, if you want to look at that. It's travel planning and preparedness, and this is one of the important things that divers or travelers should do before they leave on the adventure, no matter really where they're going. So one of the things that you can do to kind of give yourself some protection and security is to make sure that your DAN membership is up to date. You know, if you're a current member, take a look at your card, log into your account online. If you're a new diver or a diver who's not yet familiar with DAN, it's a great way to protect yourself in the event of the unexpected. For just $35 a year for an individual, $55 per year for a family, you get a host of benefits. The biggest one is probably the up to $150,000 in emergency medical evacuation coverage. So that covers you anywhere you leave your house more than 50 or more miles from home, and something happens, you suffer an emergency, an injury, Dan will take care of that and get you back home with that coverage. It also gives you access to purchase dive accident insurance, and that's something we're going to touch on a little bit more. But you know, one of the things some divers don't understand, especially new divers, they think they're covered with their health insurance. But you know, diving, it is a dangerous activity. It's safe, but it does have risks, and a lot of those things are excluded by your traditional health insurances, and which is why we came up with coverage specifically for this sport. You can also call our 24/7 emergency hotline anywhere in the world that you are and you're suffering an emergency. You can talk to one of our doctors. We'll help you arrange medical treatment, evacuation, all that stuff that goes along with it. And you don't even have to suffer an emergency to get the benefit of DAN. You can call here during normal business hours and talk to one of our medics. They are highly trained, experienced in dive medicine. We handle these types of calls all the time, and you can get information about diving with diabetes or certain conditions, or if you've had COVID. There's all kinds of reasons and benefits to joining DAN. So we always encourage every diver to do that. There's also a ton of online resources that you can check out. So we always encourage divers to have their membership up to date before they leave on a trip. If you're not yet a member and are new to DAN, it's very easy to join. We've put up the QR code here on the screen this evening. You can just scan that to your phone. That'll jump you right to the membership page. And with a few simple clicks and information, you can get signed up and enjoy all those benefits of being a member. But it's definitely something that's smart to do before you leave on your next trip. So in addition to membership, two of the other big programs that we offer are dive accident insurance and travel insurance, and I'm just going to touch on those briefly tonight. Dive accident insurance is very important because it helps protect against the high costs of dive injuries and accidents that are often left uncovered by typical health insurance. Just because you have health insurance doesn't mean that you will be covered if you have to go into a hyperbaric chamber after you get bent in a faraway location. You know, a lot of those bills could be $50,000, $80,000, $100,000 without too much trouble. It's always good to have dive accident insurance. Another thing you might want to consider is travel insurance, and most people are more familiar with travel insurance, and it gives you coverage for different things that we're going to get into. So they're not the same, they kind of complement each other, and it's smart to have different levels of protection. So we're going to touch on just dive accident insurance for just a minute, but like I mentioned before, It gives you accident medical expense coverage, so if you need to go into a hyperbaric chamber for treatment, it covers any physician charges, hospital charges, ground transportation, air evacuation. You know, those kinds of things can get really expensive, especially if you're out of the country. It includes the AD&D, permanent and total disability, search and rescue if a helicopter or the Coast Guard needs to be deployed to find a lost diver, extra transportation and accommodation if there's extra charges involved with an extended stay because you're injured because of an accident. Another one people don't think about is the lost diving equipment coverage, and it's not so much losing your diving equipment, but if your diving equipment is cut away from you to save your life in an emergency, Dan will pay to replace those expensive regulators and BCs and all those things. So all that's covered in dive accident insurance. And again, this is very simple to enroll online. You can go on dan.org, look at all the plans. It ranges depending on the state and what you're looking for coverage, but it's very affordable considering all the money that's spent on equipment and traveling. It's very inexpensive protection. Again, scan the QR code there. It'll jump you right to the dive accident insurance page, and you can check out all the information there. And then lastly, going back to the travel insurance, you know, it's always a good idea to have travel insurance, especially you know, with COVID and the uncertainty and the restrictions and the ever-changing regulations. So, you know, travel insurance is a great way to protect you against, you know, flight delays, if you have bad weather, if you have an accident or injury while you're away, if your baggage gets lost or stolen. I mean, think about how expensive dive equipment is. We travel with a lot of gear that's very valuable. So all these things really add up, and it's smart to protect yourself. So we offer two different products for this. We offer a trip insurance program, and it protects one special trip, very much how it sounds. The other product is annual travel insurance, and it protects you for every trip you take during the year, no matter whether that's business or recreational travel. And it has all kinds of different coverage in there, like I just touched on, the medical and dental, baggage for your expensive scuba equipment. Even if your identity is stolen or your passports are stolen while you're on vacation, Dan will help you out with our travel insurance. Another thing that really sets Dan apart is we really care about our members, and you don't need to be a member to purchase the travel insurance, but we offer a very high level of service with all of our products. We have insurance specialists here to help. We're here to help travelers. And one of the things that's kind of happened as a result of COVID-19, a lot of the countries are requiring what they're calling embassy letters, where you have to have a letter or proof of travel insurance coverage before they'll even admit you to the country. We're happy to provide that for you. You can also get our programs with cancel for any reason coverage, so if something comes up and you have to cancel that, you can get 75% of the trip costs back. We can also help you change your travel date. So if you have uncertainty in your booking and you're not sure if something's going to come up, you can book with Dan and we can adjust that at a later time to make sure that you're covered. So all those things really factor into your travel preparedness and planning. Again, this one is also very easy. You can just click or scan the barcode here on your phone, and it'll get you right to the trip insurance quote page. You can also explore that website and find out lots of more information. You can also call any of our insurance specialists here, and we'll be happy to help you. Just wrapping up this section here, so we had some membership and insurance questions come in the RSVPs from our friends over at scuba.com, and I'd just like to take a minute to address those. So we had a question from Dan and Juan, which is a very similar question, but they're curious about what makes one level of dive insurance better than the next. Well, that's a little bit difficult to answer because there's so many nuances with dive accident insurance and travel, and they're very specific products, but the general answer is the more you progress in the programs, the higher level of coverage that you'll enjoy. So take that into account based upon where your travel plans are. If you're diving in the Keys, you may not need as much coverage. If you're going to someplace very far away, and if there's an injury, you could have very high evacuation and medical costs. That might be something you want to consider. Going on to the next one here, so Alan asks, so what has changed for divers over the years 65 and older? And it sounds like, Alan, maybe you've been a member, maybe a long-time member, and our insurance programs have gone through quite an evolution over the last couple of years. We've really worked hard to improve them, And we're now offering coverage in most states with the exception of just a couple for divers 70 and over. So we've improved the plans, we've removed the restrictions in most places. So please go back onto the website if you haven't been on in a while, check out the coverage. I think you'll be surprised at what you can find and get covered there. Going on to the next one, Tim had a question about cost and coverage. Is it reimbursed or direct payment? So Tim, your question, it's a two-part answer. If you're talking about DAN membership, if you are a member and you suffer an accident or injury, we always advise people to call 911 first and then call DAN. And what we here at DAN do is to help you arrange all the medical services, the transportation, all that stuff is taken care of for you. So in most cases with that, you never see a bill. That stuff is handled directly by DAN. In case of the insurance, if the question was about the dive accident insurance, those payments are reimbursed similar to traditional insurance. Going on to the next one here, Holly had a question about what about insurance for disabled divers? And that's a little bit of an interesting question, but the answer is a good one. Insurance for disabled divers is no problem. We handle that exactly like we do with any other divers. It's accident insurance coverage, so you're not required to do any medical examinations, anything out of the ordinary to get that level of coverage. And then lastly, Robert G. has a question about obtaining DAN insurance for scuba instructors in Puerto Rico. I'm interpreting that question to mean professional liability insurance. And Robert, unfortunately, our professional liability insurance program is only available to residents of the 50 U.S. states. Puerto Rico is classified as a U.S. territory, so unfortunately we're not able to offer coverage for that one right now. But as I said, we've been working hard on our programs and they're ever evolving, and we may be able to do that sometime in the future for you. So that really wraps up our formal program here tonight, Frauke, and I think that we've covered a lot. I'm sure there's some questions out there. We've gone through the 6 different steps. What I'd like to do now is to encourage you who are still listening to type your questions in the chat box. We'll take a look at those and see what comes in. But I'm going to leave this screen up just for a minute so you've got our information both for DAN and scuba.com. Remember, like I said, you can call our customer service team anytime during normal business hours to get your questions answered that we didn't cover here tonight about membership, insurance, travel insurance, medical information questions. Our medics are here to help you. The folks over at scuba.com, like we talked about tonight, they're really the experts in the equipment category. So if you have specific equipment questions or brand questions or service questions, those are the folks that you really need to reach out to. So I'm going to take a look, Frauke, in the chat board here and see if any new questions have come in. I'm not seeing a whole lot coming in, so we'll give the audience here just another minute. But is there anything you just kind of want to emphasize while we're waiting here for a second that we covered tonight as far as the whole program?
Well, it's really, if you haven't taken away anything from today, here's where you can find the information. You want to go to dan.org/return, and it will get you through all of these steps that we talked about. So the inactivity, the status of your health, how to assess that or how to best assess that, your fitness level, your equipment, your diving skills, your travel plans, all of that is important. All of that deserves attention, and as we said, we're here to help. We will answer almost all questions, and if we don't have an answer, we will certainly get back to you with an answer in a reasonable time, we hope.
Absolutely. I think that's great advice. So while you were just finishing up, I haven't seen any questions come through in the chat board, so we're going to take this time to kind of wrap up our presentation for tonight. It kind of concludes our formal presentation. We'll be back here tomorrow night, June 24th, 7 p.m. It's a different presentation. This one is going to be specifically about COVID-19 and diving and the state of the industry. That's going to be hosted by Drs. Chimiak, Nisheto, and Saraiva. You can find that link to the event on our YouTube page. And I'd just like to thank all of you for joining us tonight, all the scuba.com folks that came out to listen. We hope you learned something and are going to be safe out there when you return to dive. And a special thanks to all the DAN members who are watching tonight. It's with your support that we're able to put on programs like this and to develop programs like Returning to Dive, because there's really a lot that goes into it with our research and our doctors and all of the team and rolling it out internationally. So thank you for your support. So that's all for us tonight. Good evening and safe diving, everyone.